So let's look, let me do an example to also explain it better for you. So I'm going to look at this example. So I'm going to say today, I say today is the 1st 11/2026, and you have a loan scheduled to be taken in 2 months. How much is that loan? Let's say the principal is 8 million. Yeah, and you expect that the tenor for that loan is 3 months. If you have a loan you want to take, what is your risk? Your risk definitely is that the interest rate might go up. So because you're afraid that interest rate might go up, you want to use FRA. That's what you want to do. You want to use FRA. Then the next thing is to go and look for quotes. So then the bank quote for FRA, you need to have it. So let's say the bank quote for 2-5, as you imagine, because if you're planning to take this in 2 months, remember, and the tenor is 3 months, the quote will be 2-5 FRA. And I hope that is clear. So let's say the quote is given by the bank to be 5 to 4.7%. Now, let's see what FRA will be. So let's assume spot rate in 2 months' time. I need you to understand this question so that you can understand the concept that we have been talking about. Yeah. So assume spot rate in 2 months is 7%. Let's see what is the value of the FRA. So what benefit do we get on that FRA if this is the market in 2 months' time? So try to understand this case that we have here. We are saying today we discover that we will need to take a loan in 2 months' time, right? And how much do we need? We need eight, we're gonna need $8 million for 3 months. So we have a gap for 3 months. However, we don't need the money now. We only need the money in 2 months' time. But the problem is that if we wait until 2 months' time, the interest rate might not be quite good because we have envisaged that interest rate is going to be going higher. And because we're afraid of that, we decide to consider the use of FRA. And in 2 months' time, guess what? Our prediction was actually correct because interest rate has actually gone up to 7%. So in this kind of scenario, let's check if FRA would have helped us. And the first thing I want you to do, easy one for me, is please, guys, get on your calculator and tell me, without hedging, what is interest expense? Because you need to see the scenario without hedging to know whether the hedging is even helpful itself. So let's say interest expense without hedging. Interest is equals to what? It's not just rate times principal. So if interest is rate multiplied by principal, and I said interest expense without hedging, for sure that is 7%. That is if they did not hedge, the spot is 7% in 2 months' time, which means they will have to pay interest of 7% for their loans that they want to take for 3 months. The principal is 8 million. So which means rate is 7% for annual rate, but we are talking of a tenure of 3 months. So divided by 12, multiply by 3, then the principal is 8 million. Remember, your interest expense is on the loan, not on forward. And the loan is 3 months loan. Yeah. So that gives 140,000. So which means if they did not hedge, this is what they will pay. Now, let's go into FRA. If you decide to use FRA, I told you that you must always remember that there will be the FRA transaction itself and there will be the real loan or okay. So which means in a normal FRA, you have your FRA, you have the real loan deposits, either one. And that's why I tested it because you always need it. So that is what we've already done up here. For the real one, we know that we will always have to pay 140K anyway. But now, what we expect is that the outcome of our FRA will have effects on this rate transaction, and that's how we are edging it. So now let's see what benefit do we get if we are decided to use FRA. What it means is that instead of paying 7%, that is the spot, what you are saying is that you have already fixed the rate at the borrowing rate of 5%, because this is the rate the bank will borrow you the money at 5%. So if you fix at 5% and the rate has gone to, so you fixed at 5% and market is now doing 7%. And you know that this is a borrowing. Is that a gain or a loss? If it's a borrowing. If you've been able to fix at 5% and now market has gone to 7%.
That's a
Anyone?
gain, right?
Gain.
Fantastic.
Gain,
Gain.
gain.
So which means for that FRA, your FRA has given you a benefit of 7% minus 5%. So which means you have a gain of 2% on this FRA. But how much does this 2% come to? So remember, rate is always annual. So except it is explicitly stated that it's a quarterly rate. But once it's not stated like that, you have to assume that it's annual, and it's annual for 2%. So which means if you want to convert this to the 3 months loan, because this is a loan of 3 months, it means that this FRA would have saved us 2% over 12 times 3 months, then multiply by the principal. So the principal remains the 8 million. And if you calculate that, what do you have? You have 2% times 3 times 8 divided by 12. And that gives you 40,000 gain. So which means that what has happened is that this FRA has given you a 40,000 benefit. And what is going to happen? What you are saying invariably is that whoever you have done this FRA with, remember that the FRA you are doing might not necessarily be with the same person where you are borrowing your money from. Sometimes the same bank can do it, sometimes different banks can do it. So you can be doing FRA with CIBC and you are collecting loan from RBC, right? So, but what is important is your net position. As you can see, your net position is the net of the interest that the real transaction will have to be paid, because you always have to do your real transaction. 140,000 that you have to pay, that is interest expense. However, this will reduce it for you because you're going to have a gain of 40,000. So invariably, your net position is an interest of $100,000. And what does this 100,000 mean effectively? That is what is actually confirming to you that you truly was able to fix interest at 5%. Because if you check that 5% of interest for that 8 million for 3 months, what interest expense do you have? $100,000. And that is exactly what we're talking about FRA. So you can see that because you were able to do FRA at 5%, you are not worse and you are not better than 5%. But if you had not done the FRA, you would have been paying interest at 140K. So instead of net of 100,000 that you're able to do with your FRA. But it doesn't end there because you must account for time value of money in FRA. Remember, especially with this example, let's use this example that I just did to explain to you. We said today, we know that in 2 months' time, we need to do a transaction that will last for 3 months. So this is 2 months and this is 5 months. So when we entered into FRA today, we settle this FRA at this point because we must settle FRA when we go into the new transaction, the real transaction itself. So this is when we settle this FRA transaction, and this is when we discover that our profit is 40,000 because the net profit that we made on FRA is 40,000 gain. That 40,000 gain must be paid today on this date. And if that 4,000 must be paid today, what is the value of that 40,000? You have to work with the present value of that 40,000 because the 40,000 is the 40,000 benefit over the life of 3 months. So it doesn't make sense to ask the person that will pay on a date like this to pay the whole of 40,000. It has to be the present value of that 40,000. And which means you will still remember this formula of calculating your present value. Your future value definitely will remain your 40,000. And your R is always the market. Let me write it down. Please don't forget. Don't use FRA rates for R. R is your market rate, your spot rate on the date of transaction, your 7%. But remember, 7% is an annual rate. So you need to convert it to your period that you're interested in. So divide by 12 times 3. You need to remember that. The raised to power -1 because at that point you're talking about just one period. It's not even up to 1 year. That's why you've converted it to the periodic rate. So if you do 7% times 3 divided by 12, and that gives 39,312. So invariably, what you are saying is that the real cash that should be paid to us should be 39,312. So not exactly 40,000. 40,000 is the nominal gain. So I call this now your nominal gain. But the real money that needs to be paid is the PV, which is the 39,312. And is it that you collect, if you are doing it with different counterparties, you can collect the 3912 while you go into your loan transaction and you pay your 140K to the other party. If it's the same party that is selling FRA to you and you're also collecting loan from the same bank, then instead of paying interest, of 140K on the loan, you can actually think about, okay, can we just settle net? It's possible. Yeah. Or you say, instead of giving me a total of 8 million loan, You don't have to give me 8 million loan. I need 8 million. Remember, the company needs 8 million. And they're already getting a cash payment of this amount. So they can say instead, just give me the difference. Because I only need 8 million. No. I don't need 8,039,000, if you get what I mean. So they can give them the difference and say, okay, my new loan amount. Because we can also have a question that probably ask, okay, what should be the new loan amount that the company should pay? Then they can actually receive, and they can actually collect the net. So, and what would that come to? It's minus 8 million. So that means the company can as well just collect 7,960, 7.960687 instead of collecting the whole of 8 million. Because with this, if they collect this one and they collect this one, both of them will give you 8 million that they need. Any question on this one? Very good. Yeah, FR is one of the simplest one anyway. So just be careful with your date, especially. So when you are using those 3 months, 6 months, I think that's where the common mistakes usually come from. Yeah. Okay, but we need to also learn how to set FRA. So how banks set FRA? Yeah. Let me call it setting FRA. So how are those rates being set by the bank? Yeah. And that takes us back to the same fixed income knowledge that you had about yield curve. Remember your yield curve? When you have different rates for different years, different spot yield curve. Yeah, spot yield rate. So take for instance, let me give you an example. Say you have year one, year two, year three, and you're definitely going to have the rates for different years. So for the bond that is 1 year or for a loan that is 1 year, the rate, the yield on that bond can be say 3.96, and for year two maybe 4.25, and if you are going for a 3 tenor bond, say 4.56. I'm sure you can relate with this when we explain that generally speaking, if the time is increasing, you also expect the rate to increase, and that is usually your yield curve that we always talk about. So, okay, let's say it's 1, 2, 3. So three will probably be someone like 4.56. This one will be like maybe 4.25. Then the least one will be somewhere here, and you always have something like that as a yield curve. Right. So we're saying that if you have a yield curve, then you should be able to set your FRA. There are different things. I hope you still remember. Yield curve is like if you remember, is your RF plus spread. So that is almost like your cost of debt for a company. Yeah. So if you have this information, maybe for risk-free instruments or for a corporate bond, you should be able to set or estimate what FRA should be. Yeah. And this is the way the banks usually do it. Once they have a yield curve, they have this information the way it is. Then based on this information, they can predict what their FRA should be. And it's not difficult. It's just based on understand that you have that if you say 2 years is 4.25, 2 years is 4.25 because you are compounding over 2 years. So the risk tenure is higher. So you expect this to give higher rates than year one. Likewise, you expect three to give higher rates than both year two and year three, right? And if that is the case, that same understanding you can leverage to calculate your FRA. Take for instance, say you want to calculate FRA for 1 year after year one. So something like you want to do, so year one is 12 months. So if you're planning to do FRA after 12 months, that lasts for 1 year. So which means that's 12 months slash or dash 24 months FRA. So which means you have a company that want to collect loan in 1 month's time, but in 1 year's time, 12 months time, but they are not sure what rates will be. But they know that rate today is 3.96 for the next 12 months. But unfortunately, their own loan is not required until 1 year's time. And the tenor of the loan is 1 year. So which means they need a 12-24 FRA. But you need to know what that rate will be. So we're saying that this yield curve can be used to determine what the FRA will likely be, what the bank will set the FRA to be. How will they do it? The understanding is that 1 plus R is your normal interest rate. And you expect that this is for 1 year. If you multiply this by 1 plus your FRA rate, so which means you have N is close to 1 here, N is also equals to 1 here. You expect that to actually give the annual rate of 2 years, which is this annual rate of 2 years. And that's, remember, 1 plus 4.25% raised to power 2. Remember, all these rates are annual, like I always say, but this is annual for 2 years, this is annual for 3 years, and this is annual for 1 year. So this FRA is your 12-24 FRA because you are saying after 12 months for another 1 year. So that's why you have 2 years here, because the time delay would have been 1 year here and another 1 year here. And that is why you're using a 2 year. So guys, what will be the FRA for that equation? Calculate it. Now you have the understanding, the rest is mathematics. 1 year rate has already been given at 3.96. So what you're saying is that 1 plus 3.96% multiplied by 1 plus the FRA that we're looking for is equals to 1 plus 4.25% raised to power 2. So what is your FRA, guys? Then FRA is equals to 4.54%. So what you're saying is that the 12-24 FRA should be at 4.54%. So if a bank wants to do FRA, this is the rate that they will go into the contract with you for FRA. Can you try 24-36? So we're saying that this is FRA over 2 years. So which means today we want to go into FRA that will expire in 2 years. Yeah. However, the transaction that we need that FRA for has a tenor of 1 year. So 1 year tenor is the loan. So the loan is 1 year, but we are doing FRA over 2 years before the loan is taken. So we have a lag time, the lag period of 2 years. And that is why the lag time is 2 years. And by the time we add the tenure to it, it makes 36 months, which is 3 years. Very good. So which means if you want to use this yield curve to calculate FRA for 24-36, what would that be? Remember, what you are saying is that you expect your FRA times the annual rate to always equals to the total period that you're looking at. So I want you to try it and tell me what.
So can we see the yield table, the yield curve table?
Okay, yeah, this one.
Yeah.
We are talking about 24-36. So which means the lag period is 24 months. So we need a rate for 24 months. That is 2 years for a lag period. So which means our lag period 1 plus 2 years rate is 4.25. So 4.25% plus the FRA that we need. Remember, this will be raised to power 2 because this is like period of 2 years. 1 year FRA is what we are looking for, and 2 plus 1 definitely will give us the 3-year rate, that is 4.56 raised to power 3. And that's all you're trying to solve. So if you solve that equation quickly, if you use your calculator to do it, that is,
5.2.
yeah, and that should give you 5.18%. That is 5.2 that you have.